All right, welcome back to First Team Fantasy. In this episode, we're going to be covering the Cardinals playing the Seahawks in Seattle. The Seahawks won 20 to 10 in what was kind of an ugly offensive game for the Cardinals as a whole. Josh Dobbs, fantasy-wise, didn't have a terrible day. He was 19 of 33, 146 yards. His rushing really saved the day for him. 7 carries, 43 yards, and a touchdown, 16.14 fantasy points. So again, not a terrible week. He has kind of fallen out of what when your starting quarterback has a bye and we talk about, a week rental. Josh Dobbs was kind of towards the top of that list because he was having a couple hot weeks to start the season. He's kind of cooled off a little bit, understandably so. Um, he's still not like a terrible option, but every week I feel like there's a couple better options out there. Uh,
Yeah.
the run game changed completely. Keontae Ingram, we saw, was the lead back this past week. This week, he did not play a snap, and it went back
Yeah.
to.
It was interesting because last week, outside of the extreme lack of usage, you still saw DeMercado technically lead in snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that was any sort of a tell because the usage was way out of whack.
Yeah, he had
But
2 carries and 1 reception. DeMercado did last week. He played the most snaps,
yeah,
but his usage was just
it
way
was
down.
not there. So there's no way to know that they're going to revert back to this at
Yeah,
all.
and they did. DeMercado led the backfield by far, played 80% of snaps, 13 carries, 58 yards, saw 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 17 yards, 11.5 fantasy points. He is one of those that was very funny because he was not rostered at all. His roster percentage flew up all the way to 66, and then after how the past week went back down to 20%. So now
Yeah.
he's probably available. He's probably someone people are picking up on the waiver, and rightfully so. But it's weird because I just don't know. It's another one of those backfields where it's like I don't know what they're going to
Yeah.
do next week. They also play the Ravens. So I I mean, I just yeah, I don't know. We'll get into that more later. The other guy in the backfield, Damian Williams, he had 1 carry for 2 yards, so it really was DeMercado the entire game. Um, and he had a solid fantasy week. Again, no one was starting him because of how the week before had went. But if you
Yeah.
spent the big fab and were held on to him after that poor outing, possibly could have worked out for you at least until James Conner returns. The tight end room is
Which right now we think is around week 10.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
when he could come off IR is week 10, so we'll see.
yeah. So yeah, that's something we'll have to wait and see about. The tight end room has gotten very hairy. Trey McBride has kind of
Oh,
taken
did you see what happened? I think Zach Ertz went on IR.
really.
Yeah, I actually do believe.
You are correct. Zach Ertz is moving
Yeah,
to IR for a strained quadricep that he suffered during the game. Okay, well, in this game, touch on
that
Zach
gives us
Ertz really
clarity.
quick. Yeah, 3 catches, 19 yards on 4 targets, 4.9 points, played 53% of snaps. Trey McBride is trending upward a little bit. He played 53% of snaps in this game, saw 6 targets, caught 3 of them for 29 yards, 5.9 fantasy points. Now he is in that room with Jeff Swaim and Elijah Higgins. So Trey McBride, I see his snap share going up to, I would assume, at least the 70-80 range. He will be the lead
Yeah.
tight end there. The only thing is their next 2 games again are against the Ravens and then against the Browns. So his matchups
Ooh.
are very ugly, but he is someone I'm monitoring because they don't have too many weapons, especially with James Conner still being out. He's someone, again, we'll get into him a little later, but that is someone that we're heavily monitoring as of now. Um, Hollywood, again, when there's only 146 yards through the air and only 19 completions, and when 10 of those go to the running backs and the tight ends, we're not going to see too much from the receivers. Hollywood had 3 catches for 49 yards on 7 targets, 7.9 fantasy points, kind of, or definitely a rough week for him, but he did lead the
Yeah.
receivers. That's the second week in a row we've seen Hollywood below 10 fantasy points. And again, when you have Baltimore, Cleveland, Atlanta after that for receivers, and then Houston after that, and then the Rams. I, they have a bit of a rough sled coming up, especially if Kyler isn't back at any point in that realm. So we'll
He
see.
has to come back at some point because they did remove him off of IR.
I think it's like a
What?
21-day period that they have to
Yeah.
bring him
So at
back.
some point, yeah, he will have to come back, but or
Yeah.
he'll be shut down for the rest of the year, and that does not seem like the plan in Arizona. So we will count on seeing Kyler
Mm-hmm.
within like the next 2 weeks, I believe.
Yeah. And then the other two receivers, Michael Wilson, 3 catches, 26 yards, 5 targets, 5.6 fantasy points. He did play 83% of snaps. We like him more than Rondell because he's had a couple really boom games. He's a very valid pass catcher in Arizona. It's just he's a rookie and their offense has been sputtering pretty heavily as of late, especially through the passing game with their lack of a serious running back. So,
Yeah, he's one that among other guys, like I'd definitely consider like stashing him
mhm,
for when Kyler and James Conner get back, that offense is going to be a lot better.
yeah,
So I think, when Kyler comes back, we haven't seen him with Kyler yet, but that very well may give him a big boost. And we know that rookies in the latter half of the year, that's when they tend to start breaking out. We saw what Jordan Addison just did last night.
mhm,
These things start happening for rookies in the second part of the year. So with Kyler coming back, he might come on and be somebody who could help you win your league. You never know. Definitely worth a stash.
yeah, absolutely. And the last guy there, I mean, Rondell Moore, he's not a viable fantasy play. He's actually 20% rostered, which surprises me a little bit. I guess in deeper 12-man leagues with more bench spots, I guess it goes pretty deep. But yeah, he had 2 catches, 2 yards, 4 rushes, 24 yards. He had 4 targets through the air, 4.6 fantasy points. He's just not someone I feel comfortable even rostering if you're in a 10-man. Again, a 12-man where it gets really deep, I can understand it. Uh, I mean, that's all I had for the Cardinals. Did you have anything else for them?
Nah.
Okay, so to move to the Seahawks side of the ball, this one was a lot easier. You know your main guys there. Geno, I just don't know about Geno fantasy-wise. He
It's like Matt
eight
Stafford.
Yeah, and what's weird is this game, I mean, 18 of 24, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, 6 carries, 10 yards, 14.7 fantasy points. He's currently the quarterback 22. His best week is 23, but outside of that, his highest other than that 23-point week is 16. And again, Cleveland. And to flip-flop what the Cardinals have, the Seahawks have Cleveland then Baltimore the next 2 weeks. So again, some rough sledding matchups. So yeah, Geno's not a guy that I'm considering picking up. I mean, it depends. If people in your league really hold quarterbacks and Geno's on the waiver, he might be your best option, but more than likely there's going to be someone better out there.
How about the number one rookie wide receiver on the Seahawks?
Yeah. No, screw
Jake
it.
Bobo.
Yeah. Shout out Jake Bobo. We were talking about him, and Jake Bobo ran a 4.9940. He's not crazy athletic. He's not fast. But you know what? He had a game. He had an absolute game. He's a 25-year-old rookie, and he had a game. Jake Bobo, 4 catches, 61 yards, a touchdown on 5 targets, 16.1 fantasy points. I'm going to give him his flowers.
Second touchdown of the year.
He's not a guy I'm looking at to roster, but shout out Jake Bobo. Someone that is climbing very quickly is Jackson Smith-Njigba. We saw without Debo in this game, or without DK in this game, JSN, 4 catches, 63 yards, a touchdown on 7 targets, 16.3. Him and Jake Bobo dang near had the same game, fantasy-wise. Jake Bobo actually played 75% of snaps. JSN only played 63. That is something worth noting.
Jake Bobo.
Yeah, and Tyler Lockett was actually the wide receiver 3 for them. He had 4 catches for
he
38 yards on 5 targets, played 70% of snaps,
he
7.8
was dealing
fantasy
with his
points.
own injury coming into this game. He was questionable going into the game. They removed the tag before it. I think he was still dealing with whatever. It was like a thigh injury or something. So that very well could have. I mean, I do not think you're going to see another week like this where it's Jake Bobo and JSN
Mm-hmm.
because you have, kind of uh, hobbled Tyler Lockett. DK's not even out there. This is an anomaly.
Yeah. It is worth noting though. Tyler Lockett had a very strong week this past week. He's only broke double digits twice in his 6 games played. I'm just throwing numbers out there. He's had, a 3-point week, 8-point, 9-point in this one, 7.8, so basically an 8-point week.
So I have a question for you based on, I know your stance on Tyler Lockett during this season at this point in fantasy. So the rest of season, who would you prefer to put in at a flex? Tyler Lockett or Josh Downs?
Josh Downs, 100%. Because
Okay.
I thought you were going to ask me JSN, and
No.
I was almost ready to tell you JSN though, crazily enough. I love Tyler Lockett. I've had him on my fantasy team. It feels like the past 3 seasons. Didn't get him this season. Not because I didn't think he would have a good year, it just didn't fall that way. But I'm concerned. I'm concerned that Geno isn't playing at the level he played at last season, and that makes sense to me because last season was out of the ordinary for Geno. He's been in the league forever. We know what to expect from Geno. He's actually kind of blossomed into a serviceable starting quarterback, which he wasn't for the longest time. I mean, I just don't know at this point with Tyler Lockett, and he's going into 2 very rough matchups. If you have someone else to start in your flex, I would recommend doing so. If he has a good week against Cleveland, then I'd say to fire him up against Baltimore, but I don't see that happening. Again, we'll just have to see, but I'm very concerned about Lockett that in even dealing with injury, he played 70% of snaps, and when you don't have DK, I expect Tyler Lockett to lead that receiving room. The tight ends, Colby Parkinson, Noah Fant. And to get to the running back, Ken Walker was the only running back. Or, take it back. DJ Dallas got minus 0.1 points, and no other running back in that room had anything fantasy-wise other than Ken Walker. He finished 26 carries, 105 yards, 2 catches for 6 yards on 3 targets. Again, another solid week for him. If he would have gotten in the end zone, it would have been even better. He finished 13.1 fantasy points, which I expected a little more from him against this Arizona team, but it didn't matter. They didn't need more from him. And he played 80% of snaps. If it wasn't him, it was DJ Dallas, who did nothing at all.
This Arizona, they have a really scrappy team.
Yeah.
They beat the Cowboys. They've been playing everybody fairly close. They played close for a half with the Bengals. I think their defense has been not good, but they get after the passer. They're aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be a decently tough week for the Ravens next week too.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that. And that's all I had. Again, the Cardinals are going to play the Ravens next week, and the Seahawks are going to play the Browns. So we will dive further into that when we're covering the previews for these games later on in the week. But as for this week, solid week for Ken Walker, solid week for JSN. Lockett still a little underwhelming in my eyes. Geno a little underwhelming. No DK, so can't talk about him. And that's all I really had for this one.
Yeah, nothing more to say.
All right.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yes, sir.